Alright, let's take a look at the code for our 7-segment display. So at the beginning is where perhaps the magic happens. We have two arrays that we define. The first is the segment pins, and this is the order that we connect the pins to the Arduino from the 7-segment display. Next we have a byte array, that's the digits, and you'll notice that the array consists of the zeros and ones, and it's really the state of the particular segments. So for the 0 to be displayed, we actually have to light up segments A, B, C, D, E, and F. For a 1 to be displayed, we actually have to light up segments B and C. For a 2, it's A, B, D, E, and G, and so on. So we're defining the array of bytes, and the states of these ones correspond to the segments that need to be lit to show up the particular number. Next, moving on, in our setup function, we do a loop between 0 and 7, and we set those pin modes as output, and we initially write low to those segment pins to turn all the segments off. So nothing will be displayed initially when we first apply power to our circuit. Then we begin the serial communication and display to the user, enter a number between 0 and 9. So that's going to show up in our serial monitor. Alright, let's look at the loop function. So basically in the loop function, we poll and wait to determine if we are receiving input from the user, and if that's the case, we extract that into a character variable using serial.read. And we've seen this code before where we check to see if it's between 0 and 9. We convert it into an integer by using this handy trick, doing ch minus the character 0. That's going to convert it into an integer for us. And we want to show the integer that was entered. So we call this convenience function update display, passing in the integer or the number that we have to display. So let's take a look at update display. Update display just takes that one argument, and it in turn makes a call to set segments, passing in that value. Set segments is another function, and this is where the magic happens. So you are looping here between 0 up until 7, because remember it's less than 8, 8's not included. And let's start with 0. We do a digital write, and we do segment pins I, and that will be 0. So let's look at segment pins up here. So it's first going to write to this pin, then this pin, and so forth, right, going up all the way to 8. And what we're going to write to that pin is the value from the digits array. So digits, if when we're 0, it's going to be digits. If the value we passed in, let's say, was 1, it's going to be digits 1, and it's going to loop through everything that we need to display a 1. So as an example, this would be a 1. So the first time through the loop, when n is 0, it's going to be 0, so it's going to write a low. Then when it loops again, it's going to be a high, high, low, 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 and low. All right? So by doing that, we're able to loop through whatever number that was passed in and set the appropriate segments to high for that number to be displayed. In our second circuit, the only addition we'll be making is adding a push-button switch. That will be used to perform the role on the device when the button is pressed. One end of the push-button switch goes to ground, and the other end goes to pin 9 on the Arduino. That's it. That's the only change we'll make from the previous circuit. Alright, so now I'm going to make a slight wiring change to incorporate our push-button switch. So I'm going to put that switch in the circuit. This is for our dice. Alright, one end of the switch goes to ground. We'll use ground on this side of the Arduino. And the other end of the switch goes to pin 9 on your Arduino. So I'll make that connection. Alright, and that's it. There you have it. That's the only addition we need to make in wiring for our digital dice. Okay, let's go ahead and upload the code for our digital dice. Alright, so now if I want to perform a roll on the dice, I just have to push on the push button switch. So there you go. So my first roll was 2. Let's try it again. I got a 2 again. Now I got a 6. Now I got a 3. And now a 5. So there you have it. Our digital dice. By pushing the switch, we actually perform a roll by pushing on the switch. A random number between 1 and 6 is generated, and that shows up on our 7-segment display. Let's take a look at the code for our digital dice project. A lot of the code is the same from the previous 7-segment project. Initially, at the top, we define our segment pins, and again, these are the pins that connect from the Arduino to the 7-segment display. Next up comes our byte array, and here is where we define which particular segments need to be turned on to display a corresponding number. This spin digits byte is a new addition to our code, and essentially it enables us to get that spinning animation when we push a button for a roll. So initially the A segment is lit, then the B, C, D, E, and F. So it goes around to make that animation. Here is where we define our button pin. So it's connected to pin 9 on the Arduino. So this is new. This is an addition to our code. Setup looks the same. Initially, we define our pin mode for our segment pins to be at outputs, and we do a digital write to those to be low, so that the 7-segment LED will be turned off initially. Nothing will be showing up. Then for our switch, we do a pin mode, button pin, and we initiate or we set up that input pull-up resistor on our switch, and we begin the serial communications. So that's our setup function. In our loop function, we simply do a poll. Basically, we check if a digital read on the button pin is low. That means that the switch was pressed. If that's the case, first we want to show that spinning animation. So we call a convenience spin function. And all spin does, it simply loops over with a small delay and lights the appropriate spin digits pins. So that's just to create that spinning array. After we spin, we do a roll. So the roll would generate a random number between 1 and 6, which equates to, if you are physically rolling a dice. And then we call update display passing in roll. And this update display was the function that you've seen previously, where it in turn makes a call to set segments, and again, depending on what was passed in, we do a digital write, we loop over the corresponding arrays that we initialized, and we light the appropriate segments to display the number that was passed in. So we've seen that previously. So this is the code for our digital dice. To summarize, in this project, you learned about the details of the pinouts of a 7-segment display. You also learned how to wire up a 7-segment display in a circuit. You should now be clear about the difference between a common anode and common cathode configuration. You can use your digital dice for playing board games with your friends. Let's keep the momentum going and move on to our next project.